So it sounds like you're talking some anxiety here, like keeping him up at night or waking him up in the morning or causing stomach problems or whatever. What about isolation? Now, I suspect that isolation leads to things like the anxiety that we were talking about earlier, or maybe even, more challenging mental health issues like depression and grief. Can you talk a little bit about those two things, depression and grief in older adults?
So depression and grief, when you're looking at the specific criteria and as a clinician diagnosing, they have two very separate paths. They feel similar sometimes, and the result is similar. It can be, but they are two different diagnoses, and it's important to know the difference between the two. When you're talking about grief and bereavement, that is something that is surrounding typically one event, the loss of a person or a thing like your job or your home. You can grieve those things as well. It doesn't have to be just the death of someone close to you, but that's a very person or event-centric thing. And typically the feelings of grief come in waves, and you are tying that back to missing the person or missing the thing that you lost, whereas depression is just an overarching hopelessness, sadness, feeling worthless about yourself. A lot of that happens with depression, and that's not something that we see typically in bereavement. A lot of times people that have depression have also experienced suicidal thinking or wishing that they were not here anymore, and that is generally not a symptom of bereavement. It could be, yes, that I wish I was with my loved one and I want to be with them, but it's not I want to die or I want to be dead.
Yeah.
So sometimes bereavement can turn into depression, though. And so that is really important to pay attention to, that this very targeted emotional response in bereavement doesn't then bleed out into every aspect of your life. And with older adults, too, you have to recognize that they are experiencing or can potentially experience loss after loss after loss after loss.
Yeah.
And so losing a loved one, how I might experience that is going to be very different. That could be an isolated event for me, but I still have all these other things. I still have family members. I still have a social network. I still have a job that I can come to, and I gain support from that. I have a support community. Whereas an older adult, they could be losing their entire family. They could lose their housing. They could lose their employment. And so at the end of the day, these support networks that other people that are other ages have, they're just no longer there anymore. And so every loss is just that much more magnified.
Yeah.
The miracle of compounding interest, sort of. It just, we see that. And I think it's really great for you to delineate the difference. And so many people in a vocabulary term don't, because they'll say, I'm so depressed, I lost my husband. And they're going through grief, but that the, conflation of those two terms makes it a little bit harder for people to know how to support.
Yeah. I think it's a really important point that you make. They could be experiencing loss after loss after loss. And I think there is some melancholy that goes with that. How do we know when it's time to maybe start seeking help for our loved ones who are a little bit older, when it crosses from melancholy to depression, like where it's, really significant in their lives?
Right.
What can we watch for?
Crosses over into clinical depression. The symptoms of depression, they do look different in older adults. Like we were talking about earlier, they don't necessarily have the language or know the language that another demographic might have in terms of talking about depression and specifically using the word depressed. That's not a common word that we see in most vocabularies. So you're looking for other maybe sneakier expressions or symptoms that they're hinting at or phrases that they might use. It could be things like, do you feel worthless? Are you wanting to avoid social gatherings that you used to enjoy? Do you feel like things are never going to get better for you?
Yeah.
And so not using as much clinical language, but really trying to figure out, is there a difference in how you're feeling now versus how you felt 6 months or a year ago, being able to use language that they understand and connect with. Because if you just ask, are you feeling depressed? Most older adults will tell you no. When they think of someone that's depressed, they'll think of someone that is crying all the time and not able to get out of bed and just that very stereotypical depressed person. This idea of functional depression is foreign to them.
Yeah.
The language that you use is important.
And I think you keyed in on behavioral things to look for. Like, you know, you talk about your stepmother. If your stepmother suddenly didn't care if you came to lunch, right? Or noticed real changes in sleeping and eating. And I'm always a big believer, if you have any concern, it's better to just be wrong and seek some assistance and
that's a great
be
point.
told, you know, everything's great. So
Yeah.